Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. I appreciate you joining me. Today we have a show that is part of our Joyful Art of Business series. And of course, the Joyful Art of Business is one of the fundamental concepts that almost every single professional program and service that I provide in some way is based on or relates to. And the idea certainly is that we're practicing the joyful art of business. So what that means is we're in life and we're doing some sort of business, and I generically am using business to cover work that's paid, work that's unpaid, anything that you do during your time when you're conscious and awake. It's some regular manner. We're going to call that business. And we're going to understand that it's not enough to look at our business, right, and focus on metrics that are only on financial outcomes or goals that are accomplished, whether it's, if we're doing volunteer work. We must look at the emotional outcome that we individually experience. And this is incredibly important, and so I just use this sort of a positive description of the idea is that if we're engaged in work and it's not giving us individually a positive emotional outcome, not all the time, nothing gives you, sort of consistent bliss, but more often than not that we feel positive, and I'm calling that joy, then we need to reassess and do something else. Not immediately, that we're going to make plans to transition. And I've seen this in volunteer work where someone is so focused on the goals and being of service, but yet emotionally it's just very negative for them. Maybe it's a type of work, maybe it's maybe psychologically or emotionally it's draining, and this is not healthy. If it's paid work and you just look at your pay and that you're miserable and you don't even want to do the work, then again, this is not a healthy outcome. This is not a holistic approach to assessing whether or not you're making the best choices to help you surpass your goals. What do you feel about it? And so when we're looking at practicing the joyful art of business, we have an interesting show topic today. The show topic today is, I am not a people person. What jobs are best for me? I am not a people person. What jobs are best for me? Now, this is a bit unusual because I think that sometimes the sort of default assumption in a lot of societies, and certainly in the U.S. and many other parts of the world, the idea is that we're all people, right? We're just people. I love people. I'm a people person. And in fact, in many of the jobs that I've held, and I've shared in many programs and platforms that I supported myself economically to the best of my ability, since I finished high school and was out and about in the world, and I took many different minimum wage or low wage entry jobs, and I learned a lot. And it's interesting because in a lot of those job interviews, so if it's a fast food restaurant, it's a retail store in a shopping mall. In the interviews, a lot of times they ask you, and they used to, I'm sure they still do, are you a people person? Do you enjoy people? And the reason they're asking that is, it's very, it's logical, right? Like it's your job is going to be, serving a sort of a vast array of public customers who are going to want to come to the store in the mall, or they're going to want to come to this, convenient fast food restaurant, and you need to be able to make them feel respected and that they're having a positive, experience at the business. So they're asking you for a people person, one for customers, but they're also asking you, can you work well with other people, right? Like, are you going to be able to come to your job and work well with the other people that are there putting together the food or the retail products? And that's what they're trying to figure out. So it's almost a cliche that people say, and even I see resumes when I look to hire people to work with my small firms, and it'll, pretty consistently I'll see things like, I love people, I'm a people person. There's also a big emphasis on teamwork in a lot of jobs. I was going to say more professional, but sort of across the board, actually. That's the part about, do you get along with your coworkers, or you can be able to, both get your tasks done and then support each other in a positive way at work. And so they're trying to ensure that you work, this idea that you work well with teams. And the idea is, of course, that there'll be diverse types of people on the team that are your coworkers, and they want to see if you're going to be somebody who makes work a more positive experience, or you're going to be somebody who, I assume, part of this topic so interesting is I guess the assumption is that somebody who's quote not a people person, which is why it's a bit unusual to do the show, is that in some way I guess the idea is that the people person stereotype is somebody who's smiling and, hi, how can I help you, right? And then I guess the not people person, the anti people person, I guess, is somebody who's frowning and grimacing and they stare meanly and they don't speak. I guess maybe that's why there's so much of this people person, teamwork. I love people, all this kind of, because obviously if you have a business, you want customers to be comfortable giving your business money, right? And so if they're going to come to your retail store or come to your restaurant, or they want to be treated in a way they feel comfortable, so that they'll give your business money. Otherwise, they'll just go to another store or go to another restaurant. And I guess the idea, the anti-people person, right, that I'm not a people person, is just like a mean, frowning, angry person who won't speak or won't help your customers. Okay. For the purposes of the show, of course there are people who are mean and frowning and won't speak to customers. They exist. I don't necessarily label them that they're not people person. They're not a people person. I would argue that they are a miserable person, and that they've made the decision to share that misery with the world. The part of this show topic that's most interesting to me, and where I'm focused, is the idea that some people have sort of predispositions to get a lot of their energy from other people. And these are the kind of individuals who, if they really want to get, motivated, if they're feeling a little bit low energy, and they're around other people, and they're talking to other people, or they're, engaged with, with what other people are doing, that gives them energy, and they pull from that. Okay, and that is sort of a very broad description of what we typically call the extrovert, right? The extrovert is somebody who's like, I get energy from people. Woo! I need to get pumped up because my energy was a little low, but now I'm around people and I'm listening and I'm talking and I'm sharing and I'm engaged with them, and now I got all this energy and I'm ready to get out there in the world, right? And so that's the extrovert. And what I'm endeavoring to do in this show is make a couple of distinctions. If someone is an extrovert, the assumption then that they're also going to be somebody who's not miserable and chooses not to share their misery and the pain is not valid. Just because I get energy from people doesn't mean that I can't have had a life experience and be in a situation currently based on my choices that I'm not miserable. Extroverts can be miserable. And they can be the one who decides that they want to spread misery to everybody else. And they may do it vocally, because remember, they get energy from people. So they may want to seek out a coworker or a customer, a supervisor, and vocally share. I'm so unhappy, I can't believe it. This place is horrible. This town is horrible. I hate it. Okay. So, yeah, they do draw energy from other people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to meet the desired organizational outcomes. The desired organizational outcomes were that you worked well with other people, that you made customers feel welcome, so they could, be willing and able to, buy things and then come back and tell other friends and people they know to, hey, go to that store, go to that restaurant. That's what you want, right? That behavior isn't necessarily required that somebody gets energy from other people. You get energy from other people and then be just loud, cantankerous, and vocal about how miserable you are. So in this show, what we're focusing on is the idea that there are people who, instead of drawing energy from other people, the extrovert, they're people who actually, when they need to draw energy, they draw energy from themselves. So they're sort of oriented differently. And when they're around a lot of other people, over time, what tends to happen is that drains them of energy. So the extrovert's the person who, they get energy, right? They're like, oh, I need some energy. I got to get out around people. Woo, I'm around people. I feel great. Look, I'm talking to people. I'm an extrovert. I'm getting energy from them. The reason why the extrovert wants to get out around people and talk to people is because when they're by themselves, it drains them of energy, right? So what they're trying to do is sort of get back to their more stable levels or their higher levels of energy, and that's why they're going out and seeking other people, because that's where they know they get it. The challenge is, though, when they're by themselves, then they lose. They're draining energy, and they over time, if they're by themselves over a prolonged period of time, it's exhausting for them, and they just feel like, my gosh, I got to get away from this situation where it's just me. I need to get my energy, and the only way I'm going to do it is be around more people. So if you have somebody like that, you hire them. It happens to be, a retail store in the mall, but their job that you need them to do is go in the stock room where all the additional products are, and go back there and do some inventory. Go back through and count how many different items or different things, or do verifications on the existing inventory list, and they're going to do it by themselves. Now, that type of environment, if they do that all the time, would be one that would begin to, they typically would use phrases like, this is driving me crazy, and their energy is very low because they just feel it's so, they're in there by themselves, there's no one to talk to, and they can't get any energy out of it. It's going to drain them over time. Doesn't mean they can't do a good job. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be fine at that. It might be what they do is they do that job for their work shift, and then as soon as they leave work, they're going to get out around other people, and that'll give them their energy back. That may be a way that they compensate. On the other end of the spectrum is a group of people who are just the opposite. They get their energy being by themselves, right? So when they have, the quiet, and they're able to hear their own thoughts, and they're by themselves, that's when they start to get energy. Yeah, the energy's coming. Woo, getting the energy. And then they're the opposite. So then when they're around other people, again, they're very good at it. So they may be the one that's hired in the retail store, and they're out front, greeting customers. And they can do it and do a fine job. And they're smiling and, hi, can I help you today? Welcome to the store. Do you have any questions? And they're good at that. All it means is when they finish work, right, just like the person in the stock room who's an extrovert, when they finish work, they're going to run out to be around people. The person who's an introvert who's been around people all day, the moment they finish work, they're going to go somewhere quiet. Because they're both doing the same thing. Everybody's doing the same thing. We're trying to get to our energy level. We're trying to get to the place where we feel like ourselves, and the only difference is that we get there through different methods. So extroverts get there, they pull energy from other people. Introverts pull energy from themselves. And both of these people can be excellent at any job that they're qualified for. And both of them can be, smiling and energetic and knowledgeable and polite. They can all do that. They can be detail-oriented. They can work alone. They can do all these different jobs if they're qualified and of course have the other, self-discipline skills, things of that nature. The difference is, though, when they need to get their energy level where it needs to be, they're going to go about it different ways. So all that's to say this. If somebody says they're not a people person, it doesn't mean they hate people. It doesn't mean there's some mean, frowning, horrible person who will never be able to work, anywhere but in a quiet, dark room somewhere by themselves, locked away from everyone. That's not at all the same thing. What you have are some people who, no matter what their orientation, right, whether it's to get energy from other people or get energy from themselves, they just have bad attitudes and they're miserable and unhappy, and they want to spread misery and pain. The extrovert may do it more loudly. This place sucks, I hate it. And the introvert may sort of not say that necessarily, but their body language is really tense, and they're just not, they're both giving you the same information. They're just going to express it potentially a little bit differently. So the deal is, I don't want to hire anybody who is miserable and wants to spread misery and pain at work, period. It's irrelevant whether or not they gain energy from other people or they gain energy from being by themselves. And this is an important distinction because a lot of the times when I talk to people who say to me, I'm not a people person, what they really mean is that they're introverts. But these types of concepts are misused in society or misunderstood. And there's the research on this is interesting, but it sort of a meta-analysis looking at lots of different data resources. It tends to show that especially in cultures that are more, where the overall culture is more extroverted, so it's more boisterous and assertive, like the U.S., that you tend to have many more extroverts in terms of percentage distribution in the population than you do introverts. The introverts are minority. Other parts of the world, you're going to see both types of orientation. Sometimes you'll see the numbers be a little bit different, especially depending on the culture. So when you're in a culture where maybe the introvert is more of the cultural norm, and I've worked, for example, in Japan a couple times, and even in Tokyo, which is an incredibly dense city, just people everywhere and lights and neon and everything, and it's exciting. But culturally, it's not the norm that people are shouting and loud and interrupting someone. People just have more of a demure, quiet way of expressing themselves. Now, are there loud people in Japan? Are there quiet people in the U.S.? Of course. We just went over this. And people are people. We're all individuals. But cultures tend to have different cultural identities. And so depending on where you are born or live or whatever, you tend to adopt the culture. So, that will stereotype, right, when in Rome. So that means that even though I might be maybe a huge extrovert, I go to some place that tends to be a little bit quieter, then you just respect that, right? And vice versa. I might be somebody who's very quiet and introverted, but yet I'm somewhere where I need to speak up to be heard, and I'm going to speak up. That doesn't mean, we can do whatever we need to do. My point is this. If you are saying you're not a people person, I'm pretty confident that you don't mean you're anti-people and you just want to spread misery, because usually those type of people aren't part of my programs, because I'm sort of the antithesis of that, right? I'm all about, hey, how can we surpass our goals and what can we do to practice joy? Like, miserable people don't really want to hear that. It's not at all on their agenda. So assuming that you're somebody who isn't focused on your own misery and spreading that misery, then the fact that you are someone maybe who gets your energy from being alone, that doesn't mean that you're not a people person in a derogatory way. But what it does mean, what you're trying to say is that you have got to balance. You have got to balance all of your time and energy that's with other people with some alone time, so you can get your energy level back. It's literally the same thing the extrovert does. All the extrovert does, though, is depending on where they are culturally, in some cultures, it's more accepted to be around people all the time. So the extrovert gets more of what they need because they're at a job, I'm around people, woo, love it, and then they're out socially, and I'm loud, and I'm around people, or I'm quiet. Extroverts aren't loud necessarily. I'm just sort of using that as a quick hand way to distinguish it. Many extroverts are quiet, and so I'm around people where but they need some quiet time too. Everybody needs some of both experiences. So what the argument is this. People say, I'm not a people person. Whenever they tell me that, what they really mean usually is they're introverted. And it's hard for them because if they have a job where it's just, there's never a break, they're just around people all the time, and they don't get to balance that in their regular life. We talked about, a few minutes ago, if somebody is an introvert and they're, they can be the life of the business. They're the greeter, they're the most engaged, they're attentive, they're really, connecting with customers and team members, and they do that all the time. Just like the extrovert's able to do a job, without a whole bunch of people. The difference is that they both have to get what they need outside of that. So if the introvert is in a situation at work where they're just, they're giving, right, because other people, drain them. And then they leave work and they don't have the ability to go and get that quiet time they need to get their energy back, then it becomes a situation where it takes a toll on them. So the reality is, of course, that the person who says I'm not a people person, they need to be more specific and explain to themselves. What that really means is, like, I'm drained and I can do a great job around people. I do a great job. I just need to balance that with time with myself. Now, the easiest thing would be to, outside of work, get your balance. meaning as soon as you're outside of work, so now I'm going to get my quiet time. But a lot of people, though, outside of work have a whole nother layer of responsibilities, right? So if I'm somebody who I've been drained all day at work with people, I do a great job, I'm doing a great job, everyone's pleased with my work, I'm pleased with my work, right? I mean, I'm practicing a joyful art of business. I enjoy it, I'm feeling good, emotionally, I'm just drained. But then I leave work and I just have more people, right? So maybe I have a lot of family responsibilities, and there's a lot of people, and I never get that alone time I need to recharge. Then it will take a toll. And it would be just like taking that extrovert, and they're at work, they're doing the inventory, they do a great job, but then they leave and there's nobody. They don't get any of that interaction they need with the energy to pull from other people because they go someplace and they're by themselves. Both of these situations are equally damaging long term. The challenge, though, is the person who is the extrovert, who's labeled the people person, which is not, I've been arguing for this whole show, is not accurate. There tends to be more of an acceptance and an understanding of someone saying, I'm lonely. So an extrovert says, I'm lonely, that really means that they're losing all their energy. They've got to be around other people. And it seems that that's easier for somebody to understand, even if in a job interview, somebody was like, oh, what's one of your biggest challenges in life? Oh, sometimes I can get a little lonely. Oh, okay. People aren't think that's negative. But if somebody says, what's your biggest challenge in life, and the response is, oh, well, I need a lot of alone time, then this sort of backlash is, you're not a people person, you're not a team player. Okay. Part of what I'm endeavoring to do is more education. There actually in the media has been some discussion. There have been some books and some other campaigns that help sort of get some attention to introverts, and the idea that some people, even if it's a minority in some parts of the world, are drained by people, and that they exist and that it's okay. It still seems, I think, to be perceived as somewhat of an anomaly. Whether it is or isn't statistically, I'm not going to get into a huge debate, but as I shared earlier, it tends to show that the majority of people, or a majority of people in the U.S. are more extroverted. The challenges for people who are more introverted is, A, you are a people person. If you were not a people person, you'd be that person whose only goal is to spread misery and pain. So I understand what you're saying when you say you need the quiet alone time. I am a very strong introvert. I need a lot of alone time. That doesn't mean that I'm not, enthusiastic, and I don't, connect well with people, and I'm not excellent at working well with other people and with customers and clients and students or anything like that. It doesn't mean anything like that. What it just means is I need to balance that with quiet time, because I need to get my energy level back, and that's totally standard and normal for somebody who's got that sort of personality orientation. I'm just aware of it. So I do a lot to schedule and make sure that I get that alone time so I can get my energy back. Because if I don't, then I would hear things. When I was younger, I didn't do this, right? So I was just working. I'm around people all the time. I live with other people. I'm working. I'm constantly people. And I would get to a point where I start to crash, just sort of emotionally, right? Like I haven't gotten any ability to recharge because I've been alone. And then I'd go to work. And then people would say to me, "What's wrong with you? Why are you angry? What's wrong?" And nothing was wrong with me. I'm just exhausted. I'm not, like exhausted like I haven't slept in 3 days. I'm exhausted just because it's been constant pulling of all my energy, and there's no way for me to recharge. Now, though, all these many decades later, I learned that I've got to plan and schedule and set up my life so that I can do work I enjoy and then have the ability to recharge. Everyone needs to do it. It's just a little bit harder sometimes for people who are introverts because, A, it's not as common, at least in the U.S., and there's a backlash with this sort of misperception that if you aren't a people person, that means you're that person who wants to spread misery. But those are two totally different things. I can show you people who want to spread misery who are extroverts and introverts, and I can show you people who are excellent, quote, people, right? They're in sales, or they're marketing, or they're, out front with big personalities and giving presentations or teaching and all types of things. But they both can be extroverts and introverts. The work isn't the issue. That's about your skills, your education, your interests, your self-discipline. Those are all not correlated necessarily with whether you get energy or you lose energy around people. But it takes a lot of responsibility for the person who needs to be alone to recharge, to decide how they're going to structure their work and their outside work life to get the best outcome. Because if you don't do this and you're just around people, or the alternative would be the extrovert who's alone all the time, it does wear on you, and people are going to start to notice it and say, what's wrong with you? And what's wrong with you is you need to be around get your energy back. So if you need people, you need to be around people. And if you need to be by yourself, you need to be by yourself a little bit. But you got to take responsibility for it. So I don't know how successful the plan will be to go out and educate, organizations to not use this term people person in a way that might make someone who's an introvert. And we didn't even talk about people who are shy, which is a totally different situation. Introverts just need to get their energy back by being alone. That doesn't mean that they aren't confident. It doesn't mean they're not assertive. It doesn't mean that they're not, able to do all types of work. They're introverts who are, all types of performers, professional athletes and, actors and musicians. They're just introverts. And so they plan that. I never knew, but certainly have read, Johnny Carson, who was a hugely successful entertainer in the United States for decades. Supposedly a bit of an introvert. So he's excellent on his job as a television host. He's a television host in the United States for decades, worldwide known, I'm sure, and sort of created almost a standard for a very successful nighttime television host. And great, right? But needed the other time when he's not working to balance, to recharge. It's not an unusual thing at all, really. But it takes the responsibility of the person who says, I'm not a people person, assuming, again, that what you're talking about is that you need your alone time to recharge. Well, then that's okay. What jobs are best for you? Any job you want to do is best for you. But you've got to have the 360-degree analysis of your life to make the decision, where am I recharging? How am I structuring my life so that consistently I'm recharging? So if you want to do a job that you enjoy, that brings you a sense of joy, right? Then you've got to balance that with some quiet time, and you've got to adhere to this, because if you don't, you're gonna run out of energy. So any job is best for you if that's what you like. The challenge is you have to be honest. Now, don't go in a job interview then and tell people, well, let's do some things, and I believe I'm an introvert, and I need to have alone time. They're not going to do it at the job. If it's a job that doesn't provide it, then you need to go provide it outside the job. If you can't get any alone time outside of your job, then you need to go find a job where you have alone time at work. But I don't think it's reasonable to go and expect employers they're going to go create the job to suit your individual needs. So if the job is a solo, quiet place job, just because you're an extrovert and you go and tell them, well, you need people to get your energy back, they're going to think, well, who cares? Like, that's the job. You can do your energy after you finish your job. You just hear about that less. And, of course, a lot of times people who need to be around people will go out and find jobs where they're around people all day, because that is feeding what they want and they need. The person who needs to be alone has the same choices, although a little bit different, because you have got to take responsibility to decide if you're going to be able to get your alone time to get your energy back outside of work. If you're not, because the moment you leave work, you got more people and more stimulation and talking and energy draining, then you need to go at work and go find a job where you can get your quiet time at work. But you can't expect the people at work to change the company, the division, or the job description just because you need alone time. If you make a decision knowing that you get drained when you're just around people all the time, whether or not you label that introvert is not really relevant to me, then if you know you need that alone time and you refuse to take responsibility to schedule that, and then you go to work all day and you're around people and you're drained and the moment you leave or before you even leave work, you got more phone calls and you got more things and more people and you're drained, and then you fall exhausted asleep for a few hours and you wake back up and it's more people, and you just keep doing this, then you put yourself in a very dangerous situation. And it doesn't make any sense, because you know what the challenge is. You need some alone time. If you can't do it because outside of work you have a lot of engagement and people and all of that, that's great. Then you need to find a job that allows you the alone time. And if you refuse to do this, then yes, there's going to be a point where you are going to start to have negative consequences. Other people at work are going to start to say, what's wrong? You know, you don't seem like yourself. And it's going to wear on you. And it's just not healthy, and it doesn't have to happen. So what job is best for you? Where do you need the alone time? If you've got the alone time outside of work, then you can go to your job and be, you know, around who knows how many people, because that's no problem, because you know you can balance it outside of work. If you're at a job that you really love and you don't get any alone time and you don't have any alone time outside of work, what do you think is realistic? Sometimes, depending on your situation outside of work, you can start to say, in some situations, if, you know, let's say you're in a lot of social groups, you've got a lot of, you know, volunteer activity and all, and this is a lot of activity that's why you're always around other people, you could start to cut some of that down and, you know, say to yourself, hey, I'm going to take, you know, 1 or 2 or 4 nights a week or days whenever you're off work, and I'm going to have some quiet time. You need to start saying no. But if the reality is you have a, you know, a large family obligation and you don't have the ability to say no, there is nobody else to do it, then if you can't cut back in the outside of work situation, you're going to have to cut back at work, which means don't go quit your job. Obviously, that's dangerous if you don't have a plan, you know, financially and professionally. But what it means is you need to start looking around and thinking, what are some things I can do, or some other jobs, either in this field or in this industry or even in the same organization, where I could be more solo. And then you need to start taking responsibility to make that happen. Because you owe it to yourself to be kind to yourself, to take care of yourself. And as I wrap up, I'll give you an example. So when I was younger, I worked a lot of, you know, food service jobs and everything. One of the jobs I learned I loved was in food service was a delivery driver, like a pizza delivery driver. And the reason I loved it is this, because I need alone time, right? So I think I'm an equally good waitress. But waitress, I don't get alone time because I'm constantly interacting with customers, and I mean, you're never by yourself. You just work, which is great. But as a driver, delivery driver, I would go and get the food, and then I'd get in my own car and have total alone time to drive it to the delivery location. That, for me, was perfect. Once I found that, it allowed me to still be in food service, right, where I had my experience and skills, but it allowed me to also find a way to do some alone time, and it was a perfect job for me in that food service setting at the skill level and education level I had. So you have to do that. You've got to take the responsibility to figure out and start coming up with a plan. You know, I need to locate, find, identify a place where I can get some alone time if I don't have the ability to get outside of work. But I don't think it's ever a good idea to go to anybody at a job and tell them that you're not a people person. They're not going to understand what that means, and all they're going to think is that you're going to be miserable and spread misery to their customers and coworkers. And that's not what you're trying to convey, but that phrase is not understood. You need to explain to yourself that you've got to get your balance, but it's up to you to make the decisions. If you can cut back in your outside life, great. If you can't, because there's just too many responsibilities, there's nobody else to take them over, then you've got to start coming up with a plan. What can you do with your job skills where you can add some of that alone time in? It can and it will be done, because I believe that you're going to do this. It's very important. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, you can come to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of today. Thank you.